Back now on Bay Sunday, our next guest is the Executive Director of the Young Audiences of Northern California, a youth program bringing professional artists into Bay Area schools, reaching 81,000 students throughout the Bay Area last year. It's a hands-on program that introduces young students to the arts, and hopefully they grab onto it in hopes of giving them a well-rounded education. It's not always about science and math, mind you, and please welcome Kris Murray. How are you?
It's a pleasure.
Great to have you.
Lovely to be here.
Now, we talked about it, but the arts, sadly, because of all the budget constraints the last couple of decades, they are slowly and quickly being squeezed out, aren't they?
Quite deliberately in some cases. The statistics are really troubling. In the Bay Area, half of our schools don't offer a single visual arts class. A third of our schools don't offer any music classes. And across this state, 89% of our schools are failing to meet the state minimum criteria for arts education in their curriculum.
And, you know, I'm married to a piano teacher, a dance teacher. I know why it's so important, but tell our viewers, why are the arts so important?
Well, the arts are important certainly if you're going to pursue a career,
Sure.
but they're as important if that's not your career path.
Sure.
Studies have shown that children who experience arts curriculum in their schools outperform their peers who don't on virtually every academic and social measure. And most interestingly, the benefit of arts curriculum is even amplified for students who are living in poverty or who have other risk factors in their lives. The arts are uniquely suited to teaching these, we call them 21st century learning skills, but they are the skill sets that employers are looking for. You want employees who can innovate, who can collaborate, who can work together, who can go through several iterations. You know, those are the kind of skill sets folks are looking for, and the arts are really well suited to teaching those in an integrated way.
And it's such a crime because so many kids out there have these skills inside them, but they never get an opportunity to show them off.
It's true. We often, when we hear from students who participated in our program, one of the things they most consistently tell us is that they discovered something about themselves.
Right.
They found a voice. We have a lovely story of a little boy who was at a school here in San Francisco, was really struggling, and he had a lot of factors working against him, and the school had brought in some experts because this kid was being bullied. We put a taiko drummer into this student's classroom for a period of 8 weeks. And the taiko teacher, you know, I don't know if you know taiko, it's big drums and it's really massive, but it's also really carefully controlled.
Okay.
And sure enough, if this little boy didn't discover that he was pretty good at taiko, and over the course of the 8 weeks, he was moved to the lead drum.
Oh, wow.
And found a place in this community where he had been the bully.
His self-esteem went up.
Object of bullying. Yep.
Whole shebang.
He suddenly was respected by his peers because he could do something that nobody else could do. That's the kind of change that can happen, and it can transform a classroom or a school when our artists go in.
Well, let's talk about young audiences.
Yeah.
How does it work? I know you go how many counties, and you actually go into the schools. This is part of the curriculum, right?
We do. We serve all 9 counties of the Bay Area, most significantly in those kind of immediately ringing the Bay, San Francisco, Alameda, Santa Clara, and San Mateo counties. What we do is we work with a roster of 54 community-based professional artists. Art is their livelihood. We place them in schools where they work with kids for anywhere from 1 day to 20 weeks and take them through their artistic practice, whether it's dance, music, theater, visual arts. And the children get a chance to be artists, and the classroom kind of becomes a studio where it can be okay to make a mistake.
And do you find when they're finished, they're like, no, why are you guys going?
Oh, it's devastating.
Oh, I bet. 20 weeks of learning the taiko drums, and all of a sudden you pull them out.
Right.
You know?
But in many cases, were we not in that school, these students would not have any art experience.
And your teachers are professionals.
They are.
You
they
hire
are artists.
the best, right?
One of the criteria for joining our roster is that you have to be, we call it virtuosic. You have to be at the top of your artistic game, and then we provide the support you need to make that accessible to young people.
And you talked about this one young boy here in San Francisco. There must be a whole bunch of stories where kids have gone on to play instruments or dance or whatever.
There are, but I think as important are those stories where kids found a place to be successful and maybe didn't pursue the arts. I mean, the arts certainly are a noble pursuit, but not everybody goes that way. Yeah. You know, I didn't become an artist, and yet Mrs. Hewlings, my 4th grade music teacher, definitely influenced who I am. You know, she taught me to listen before I sing. She taught me that my voice could be stronger when it was combined with others. Those are some lessons I use every single day, and I'm not an artist, by any stretch of the imagination.
Now, how does the program, how do you pick where you go?
We do a lot of outreach to schools, and we also solicit funding from institutional funders, corporations, and individuals, and sometimes those funders will have a particular interest. We have a huge program that we do with California Arts Council that this year will put us in a school in San Jose, and we'll be there all year long with 2 artists, one in theater and what is the second one? One in visual arts. And so sometimes it's dictated by where the funding comes from, and sometimes by, where we can find an administrator who will make room in the curriculum and room in the school day for some arts experiences.
And it's everything. Dance, sculpture, music, the whole
We have
shebang.
multimedia. We, I think some of our most successful and most popular programs involve music. Drumming is a big one. Afro-Cuban drumming, Afro-Brazilian drumming, taiko drumming, opportunities for kids to touch instruments and get involved and to experience some control over something that can be so big and terrifying.
Well, our budget woes are still there, but the future in the arts seems to be alive, at least in kids, even though some of them have never been exposed to this.
It's true. Right? And there's a state initiative right now that Young Audiences is involved in that is really seeking to sort of seize this moment in history when we have a legislator, a governor, and a state superintendent of schools who are all aligned in thinking that the arts are important. And this collective action, we call it Create California, brings together arts educators, policymakers, and administrators, and is really seeking a way to put arts into schools in such a way that they can't be excised when budget woes raise their heads. Our school funding's been cut for the last 35 years.
Yeah.
We can't just bemoan that fact. We have to take responsibility for this, for the way the world is working right now. And we are determined to find a way to integrate arts more seamlessly into the curriculum so that it's just part of every child's school day.
Well, it was for us growing up.
It sure was.
And it was, I had Miss Flora, she was our choral director in Moraga, and I remember her. She played, I forgot the little thing she played, a harpsichord.
The auto harp, probably.
That was it, yeah.
I have one.
How old are we?
Ching, ching,
But I
ching.
remember her and sang and learned, some of the classics and all that kind of thing. It's such an important part of what we do.
Lots of times we assume that what's happening in schools now is what happened when we were there.
So different.
And if there's one thing I want people to do, it's to become educated.
Yeah.
Call your school district, find out what they're doing about the arts, find out if they're engaged in Create California, and take some action, demand some action.
Well, hopefully we motivated the troops out there. Kris, so nice to meet you.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much, and all the best.
Thank you.
All the best. If you'd like more information on Young Audiences of Northern California, please visit ya-nc.org. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week with more Bay Sunday.